She shouldn't have been there. Not in that room, not at that table, not in a mission that every man in the room had already decided was impossible. But she was. The lights hummed above the steel briefing table, maps scattered like fragments of a war no one wanted to fight. Every pair of eyes slid past her as though she was nothing more than an empty chair. The words being spoken weren't meant for her. Precision, impractical, out of range. They spoke as if the mission was already dead. And yet she listened, calm, silent, the way she always had. 3,000 meters, a shot so far it bordered on fiction. Even the veterans smirked when the commander threw the number out like a dare. She could almost hear the unspoken words, not for her, not for the girl who doesn't belong. But she didn't argue, she never did, because she knew something they didn't, something she hadn't told anyone, not yet. Her hands rested on the table, fingers tracing the edge of the map, pretending to study the contours of the mountains. In truth, she was listening to her heartbeat, steadying it, teaching it the rhythm it would need when the time came. That rhythm, calm, measured, unshaken, was all that stood between life and failure. The commander's voice cut sharp across the room. "This is suicide, a ghost shot, no one's pulling this off." No one spoke up. Not a single soldier, not a single operator dared suggest otherwise. And for a flicker of a second, she wondered if maybe they were right. If maybe her silence wasn't strength but cowardice. If maybe being invisible was safer than being seen. But then the face of her brother flashed in her mind. The same brother who had been taken, years ago, by the very cartel whose leader now stood as their target. She had never spoken of it, never allowed it to stain her professionalism. But it was there, always there. And tonight the mission wasn't just a line on a map. It was him. She pressed her lips together, lifting her eyes just enough to meet the commander's. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. His sneer already told her what he thought. And still she said nothing. Instead, she carried her silence out of that room, down the dimly lit hallway, out into the chill of night where the base generators hummed like a heartbeat against the desert air. She inhaled deeply. The smell of sand, oil, and dust wrapped around her like an old memory. It grounded her. And in that moment she made a decision. If they weren't going to believe in this mission, she would. If they weren't going to carry it, she would. The helicopter blades churned the next morning, throwing grit into her eyes. No one offered her the prime seat. She took the edge, pressed against the window, her rifle case balanced on her knees. Every bump of the ride rattled through her chest, but she never let it show. On the outside she was stone. Inside she was fire. The men beside her laughed, the nervous kind of laughter soldiers used to disguise fear. One muttered something about crazy distances. Another about a fairy tale shot. She didn't correct them. She just watched the desert roll beneath, mile after mile of barren land leading toward mountains sharp as broken glass. Somewhere out there, the man responsible for hundreds of deaths was hiding, guarded by an army of shadows. And yet she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of herself. Afraid of what would happen if her hands shook, if her breath betrayed her, if the moment came and she couldn't take it. The helicopter dropped them at the edge of a canyon. Dust swallowed the landing zone and the men moved out quickly, checking their weapons, whispering their plans. She followed, her boots crunching against gravel, the rifle case a weight she carried as though it were her own spine. The climb was brutal. Steep ridges, loose rock, wind biting against every step. Her legs burned, but she welcomed the pain. It reminded her she was still here, still moving, still capable. She kept her thoughts locked in rhythm. Left foot, breathe. Left foot, right foot, breathe. Hours passed before they reached the perch. A narrow plateau overlooking a valley dotted with safe houses, vehicles, and figures that moved like ants across the dirt roads. The cartel leader was in one of those houses. Which one? No one knew yet. But she knew, not because of intelligence, not because of maps, but because instinct told her. She saw the way the men guarded one building more than the others. She saw the antenna on the roof, the double patrols circling its walls. That was him. She said nothing. She set down her case, clicking the latches with deliberate care. The rifle unfolded like an extension of herself, each piece locked into place with a sound that echoed against her bones. She assembled it the way some people said prayers, slow, reverent, certain. 3,000 meters. She laid down on the ground, pressed her cheek against the stock, and looked through the scope. The world narrowed to a tunnel, her eye drinking in distance as if it were nothing. The men in the safe house looked impossibly small, as if they were figures painted on glass. Her breath caught, not from fear, from memory. She had been here before, not in this place, not in this mission, but in the stillness of a night when she had once waited too long and failed. Her finger hovered near the trigger, not touching it, just feeling the gravity of what it meant. She wasn't pulling steel, she was pulling history. And in that silence she finally spoke, though only to herself. This isn't impossible, it's necessary. The radio crackled at her side. A voice asked, "You think you can hit that?" She didn't answer. She just breathed. The wind shifted, a dry current rolling across the plateau, tugging at her hair, pressing against the barrel of the rifle. She adjusted slightly, a movement so small it looked like nothing, yet to her, it was everything. 3,000 meters, still unproven, still mocked as impossible, but distance was not what worried her. Time was. How long would she have to hold this position? How long before the enemy moved, before shadows changed, before fatigue crept in and betrayed her focus? She glanced at the men around her. They weren't looking at her. They never did. They muttered into radios, checked equipment, argued over coordinates. One of them, a sergeant she'd worked with before, shook his head. "This is a joke," he whispered, not quietly enough. She let the words pass, just another layer of noise, but inside she felt the sting. Not because they doubted the shot, because they doubted her. Why did she even care? She told herself it shouldn't matter. The mission was bigger than their voices, their smirks, their dismissals. And yet, in the hollow space of her chest, the old wound ached, the same wound she carried from every room where she was overlooked, every mission where she was treated as expendable. The scope revealed the world below with brutal clarity. Men carrying rifles, trucks pulling up with supplies, a woman in a bright dress leading a child across the dusty courtyard. That image stopped her. A child, innocent, small, running where soldiers walked. Her finger froze. For a long moment she just watched. The child laughed, the sound too faint to reach her ears but vivid enough that she could imagine it. And in that laugh she heard echoes, memories of another time, another life, before the uniform, before the missions. A time when she believed in safety, in family, in something that didn't involve crosshairs and impossible distances. The memory hurt, it always did. But she forced herself to pull back, to remember why she was here. The cartel leader, the man who orchestrated executions, kidnappings, massacres, the man who profited from pain, who treated lives as numbers, bodies as bargaining chips. He was the reason her brother never came home, the reason she still woke up some nights with her fists clenched, teeth grinding against the silence. And now he was her target. But the mission wasn't as simple as a single pull of a trigger. Not yet, not until she had certainty. Her radio hissed, movement inside, possible ID on the subject. She adjusted focus. Her scope slid across windows, doorways, curtains fluttering in the heat. Shadows shifted. Men entered, men left. And then a figure, taller, broader, moving with authority. Guards stepped aside as he passed. No question, that was him. Her pulse steadied. Her breath thinned. Every muscle in her body softened into stillness. And yet she didn't fire, not yet. Because she saw something else. The child, the same child she had spotted before, running back into the courtyard, chasing something, a ball, maybe, or just imagination, too close to the target's building, too close to the line of fire. Her jaw locked. The order hadn't been given, but she knew it was coming. The cartel leader was in sight, The shot was open, but she couldn't. Not now, not with that child there. Her radio snapped again. "Shooter, do you have the shot?" She didn't answer. "Shooter, respond." She pressed her lips together, eyes still locked on the glass where the target stood. For a heartbeat, her finger twitched. She could end it. She could erase the man who had ruined countless lives, but she didn't move. Because to take him now meant risking the child, and that was a line she wouldn't cross. Not again. The memory came uninvited. Another mission, another place, years ago. A village where her team had moved too fast, too recklessly. The objective had been achieved, but the price had been unbearable. Innocence caught in the blast. A mistake that no one spoke of, but she carried like a brand across her conscience. Never again. She exhaled slowly, long and deliberate, letting the wind take her breath away. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke into the radio. Negative, not clean. Silence on the other end, then static, then anger. "What the hell do you mean, not clean? That's the shot." She didn't argue, she didn't explain. She just stayed where she was, motionless, refusing to lift her finger. Minutes dragged. The child disappeared from view, led away by the woman in the bright dress. The courtyard emptied. The world narrowed again. The target remained. Her radio hissed once more. "Shooter status." She inhaled. Her lungs filled with dust, memory, determination. She let it out slowly, her cheek pressed to the stock, her heart aligning with the reticle. And just before she answered, a sound cut through the silence. Gunfire, not hers. Below, chaos erupted. Guards rushed, trucks revved. Someone had triggered an alarm. The safe house swarmed with movement. The target was gone from the window, swallowed by the confusion. Her stomach dropped. The shot was gone. The commander's voice exploded in her ear. "You hesitated. You had it and you blew it." She closed her eyes, not in shame, not in regret, in control, because she knew what she had done. She had chosen restraint over revenge, discipline over impulse, and she would choose it again. But now the mission had changed. The target was moving, and if they wanted him, they would have to chase. She packed the rifle, every click of its disassembly echoing like judgment. Around her the team cursed, argued, scrambled. No one looked at her. No one said thank you for sparing the child. All they saw was failure. She rose, lifting the weight of the rifle onto her back. For a moment she stood at the edge of the plateau, staring down at the valley where dust clouds swallowed the fleeing convoy. And she whispered to herself, barely audible beneath the wind, "Not yet, but soon." Then she turned, following the others into the descent. Her body ached, her mind burned, but deep inside, beneath the doubt, beneath the silence, something stronger stirred. The mission wasn't over, it was only beginning. The descent was brutal. Loose stones skidded under every step, dust rose with each impact, and the valley below filled with the roar of engines pulling the target farther and farther away. The men around her cursed, stumbling as they half ran, half fell down the ridge. She stayed quiet, moving with control, every step calculated, every muscle reined in. On the outside calm, on the inside fury. Because she knew what they thought, that she'd failed them, that she'd let him go. But failure had a different face in her mind, the face of the child, the soundless laugh, the way innocence had brushed against the edge of violence and nearly been erased. That was failure, not this, not yet. Her radio spat static, then a voice. "Convoy heading west, repeat, westbound on Canyon Road." West, that meant a choke point, a stretch of dirt road pressed tight between canyon walls. She pictured it instantly, saw the angles, the blind spots, the possibilities. If they moved fast, they could cut him off. The commander barked orders, "Move, double time." They ran. Gravel tore at their boots, sweat streaked down their faces, lungs burned in the heat. The canyon air was thin, sharp, unkind. Every sound magnified, the grind of stone, the metallic rattle of gear, the desperate rhythm of breath. She ran with them, not at the front, never at the front, always at the edge, the silent shadow, but every step carried the same weight. The road appeared ahead, carved like a scar through the canyon. The convoy roared in the distance, trucks kicking up a storm of dust that cloaked the sky. She dropped to one knee, unslinging her rifle before anyone asked. Instinct pulled her forward. Set up now. She was already prone, already aligning the scope, already slowing her heart. The world narrowed once more, a tunnel of glass and steel. Through the dust, figures emerged, trucks armored with steel plates, men leaning from the sides, rifles glinting in the light, and in the middle a vehicle larger, darker, more guarded. That was him. She didn't need confirmation, she just knew. The reticle slid across metal and shadows. Her finger rested against the trigger. This was it. The impossible shot might have slipped away at the house, but here, maybe here, it could be taken back. But then the voices came. The commander over radio. Do not fire, repeat, do not engage, we need him alive. Her chest tightened. Alive, that changed everything. Alive meant precision, timing, risk. Alive meant stepping out of the safety of distance. One of the men near her muttered, "She's not gonna do it, she's not capable." She ignored him, not because it didn't sting, it always did, but because the scope demanded her full attention. The convoy was closer now, engines growling like beasts, dust swallowing detail. Then gunfire erupted. Not hers. Bullets sliced the canyon walls, sparks raining down. The convoy's guards had spotted them. Chaos exploded. Her team scrambled for cover, rifles snapping back with rapid fire. Echoes bounced off stone, a storm of noise and fear. But she stayed prone, calm, still. The storm couldn't touch her if she didn't let it. Her world remained inside the scope. The target's vehicle swerved, tires skidding on gravel, guards shouting orders. Her chance was slipping again. Her breath steadied. Her hands didn't shake. She let the chaos blur, let the noise fade, let herself exist only in that thin, fragile line between decision and silence. And then a window rolled down. For the briefest moment she saw him, the cartel leader, thick-necked, scarred face, arrogance carved into every line, a man who had built his empire on pain. Her finger tightened, just enough. But then the commander's voice tore through the radio. Not the kill, we take him breathing. Her jaw locked, she knew the risk, she knew the command, and yet in that split second a war raged inside her. The brother she had lost screamed for vengeance. The soldier she had become demanded restraint. Her decision came like a whisper, not revenge, not yet. She shifted, the reticle sliding from his head to the engine block. A harder shot, a smaller target, but it would stop the vehicle, trap him, give the team a chance. Her breath flowed out, slow, gentle. The squeeze of the trigger was a secret shared only with the rifle. The shot cracked. Metal screamed. The vehicle jolted, smoke bursting from under the hood. Tires locked, rubber burning against stone. Guards shouted, scrambling as the convoy ground to a halt in the choke point. The canyon erupted, gunfire from both sides, soldiers against Cartel, chaos pressing against every breath. She reloaded without thought, chambering another round. The men beside her shouted orders, curses, prayers. She barely heard them. Her world was still the scope, still the narrowing tunnel where distance was erased by focus. Targets moved, guards fell, trucks burned. But through it all, one thought anchored her: he's still alive. The commander's voice, ragged and furious. Advance, move in now. The team surged forward, closing on the convoy. She stayed behind, covering them, her shots clean, precise, each one a shield against the chaos pressing in. And yet doubt gnawed at her. Had she done enough? Would this end here, or had she only bought more time for him to escape again? Her radio crackled. Shooter, we're breached, vehicle secure. Her chest lifted, relief faint but real. Maybe finally this was the end. But then came the scream, Not from her team, from below. The child. Her scope swung, frantic, heart clawing against ribs. Dust swirled, gunfire echoed, and there, through the chaos, she saw the small figure. The same child, dragged into the crossfire, caught in the panic of men who would use innocence as a shield. Her breath froze. The mission wasn't over. It had just become something else entirely. Gunfire chewed the canyon walls. Echoes collided with dust clouds, turning the air into a storm of sound and grit. But she heard only one thing, the cry of the child. It sliced through the chaos, fragile, terrified, a sound that had no place in war. She froze for half a breath, the reticle shaking across rubble, smoke, shadows. Every instinct told her to stay on mission, to keep her scope on the convoy, to protect her team. But her heart had already turned. The child stumbled through dust, dragged by a cartel fighter using the small body as cover. A shield, a hostage. The soldier in her had seen it before. The woman in her wished she never had. Her jaw tightened. The reticle followed. Her finger brushed the trigger. One pull and the threat could end. But at 3,000 meters in chaos with a terrified child pressed against a gunman's chest, the risk was unbearable. One heartbeat too fast, one gust of wind, and she would not just end the threat. She would end innocence. Her chest constricted. Memory surged again. Another child, another place, a mistake she had sworn would never repeat. The radio hissed with static and shouts. "Shooter, cover us. Where's our cover?" She didn't answer, couldn't, not yet. Her eye pressed to the scope until the glass might have shattered under the weight of her stare. She slowed everything inside her. Breath, pulse, thought. The chaos outside became distant, a muted storm. All that existed was the line between the crosshairs and the choice no one else could make. And then a flicker. The fighter shifted, just slightly, just enough, for a sliver of space between hostage and captor. She didn't think, she moved. Breath out, finger squeeze, silence. The rifle cracked and the fighter dropped instantly, collapsing into dust. The child stumbled free, frozen, eyes wide, surrounded by fire and men with rifles. For a moment, time held its breath. Then someone screamed, "We're compromised, more hostiles incoming." Her scope shifted, catching new shapes spilling into the canyon from hidden routes. Reinforcements, dozens of them, too many. The commander's voice came harsh and clipped. "We've got what we need, extraction now." But it wasn't true, not yet, because in the blur of smoke she saw him again, the cartel leader, pulled from the ruined vehicle, hustled into another truck by his guards. The engine roared, wheels tearing at the dirt. He was slipping away. Again. Her stomach dropped. The mission hung by a thread, and she was the only one holding it. She tracked the truck. Distance stretched. 3,000 meters became more. The reticle drifted, caught, corrected. Every muscle screamed against exhaustion. Her breath came shallow, stolen by dust and memory. She whispered to herself so softly the wind nearly stole it. "Steady, steady." Her finger curled. But then the child. Her eye flicked back, and she saw the small figure still in the courtyard, frozen, crying, lost in the storm. Alone. The choice split her open. The soldier in her screamed, "Take the shot, end the mission." The human in her whispered, "Save the child, let him go." Her hand trembled, the first tremor of the entire mission. And with it came the truth she had tried so long to bury. She wasn't here just for the mission. She wasn't here just for justice. She was here to rewrite a failure she could never forgive herself for, to keep one child alive because she had failed another. Her radio crackled, "Shooter, take the damn shot." She closed her eyes for half a second, long enough to hear her brother's voice, not as he was taken, but as he had once been, laughing, teasing, alive. Long enough to remember why she was here. Her eyes snapped open. The reticle slid away from the truck, away from the fleeing leader, back to the courtyard, back to the small, terrified figure. Her shot cracked through the chaos, not at a man, not at the mission, at the ground near the child's feet, a warning, a command. The child flinched, then darted, running, stumbling, into the arms of the woman in the bright dress who had appeared from the smoke like salvation. Together they vanished into cover. Safe. The mission slipped. The truck roared farther into the canyon, taking the leader with it. Her team's voices exploded in her ear. Fury, accusations, confusion. She said nothing. She simply packed the rifle, each piece folding back into silence. Her movements were slow, deliberate, reverent, as though she were closing the pages of a story she already knew the ending of. The commander stormed toward her, face twisted with rage, spitting words she didn't even process. She heard only fragments: failure, disobeyed, wasted. But beneath his anger, she caught something else in the eyes of the men who had seen her shot. Something quieter, something they wouldn't admit out loud. Respect. Not for the mission, not for the result, for the choice. She slung the rifle across her back, dust coating her uniform, sweat burning her eyes. And for the first time in the entire operation, she allowed herself a breath that wasn't controlled, wasn't calculated. A breath that was simply human. The cartel leader had escaped. The mission was incomplete, but the child was alive. And in the hollow silence of her chest, she realized something she had never dared admit. Maybe missions weren't always about orders. Maybe sometimes dignity didn't speak. It simply acted. The extraction bird thundered overhead, rotors slicing the smoke. The team loaded fast, shouting, shoving, carrying the weight of chaos on their backs. She followed last, boots dragging against gravel, eyes drifting once more to the canyon where dust clouds swallowed the fleeing truck. Her mission wasn't over, not yet. She would see him again. And next time, there would be no hesitation. The ride back was silent. Not because the helicopter was quiet, the rotor blades screamed, rattling every bone, shaking every thought loose. But inside, between the men, between her and the commander, silence pressed heavier than the noise. No one looked at her. Not directly. Some glanced once, quick, sharp, then looked away as if her presence was an open wound they didn't want to see. The commander sat opposite, jaw locked, arms crossed so tight it looked like his body was trying to cage in his fury. He didn't yell. Not here. Not with the men listening. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. She kept her eyes on the floor, on the dirt still clinging to her boots, on the faint scratches in the rifle case resting at her side. She didn't regret it. Not the choice. Not the shot. But regret was a strange thing. It didn't always come from the act itself. Sometimes it came from the way others saw it. From the way a room shifted when you walked in, carrying a weight no one wanted you to have. Her chest felt heavy. She forced herself to breathe steady, to keep her face calm, unreadable. But inside, doubt gnawed. Not about the child. The child was alive, and that mattered more than anything. But about everything else. Would they ever trust her again? Did it even matter if they did? The helicopter touched down hard, skidding against the landing zone, kicking up a storm of sand. The men filed out quickly, boots hitting dirt with relief. She followed last, her steps measured, her rifle case held like it was part of her. The commander didn't wait. He turned on her the second they were clear of the rotors. His voice was low, sharp, each word cutting like a blade. You disobeyed. You cost us the mission. You cost us him. She didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She just stood there, dust whipping across her face, letting his words fall where they may. Because what could she say? That she valued one child's life over the mission. That she had made a choice no order could dictate. That she had refused to repeat a mistake that still haunted her. He wouldn't understand. None of them would. So she stayed silent. Silence had always been her shield. It kept her steady when the world tried to shake her. It made her invisible when eyes turned sharp. It gave her space to decide who she was when everyone else tried to decide for her. The commander stepped closer, his face inches from hers. His voice dropped to a whisper, venomous. You'll never get another shot, Not with me, not with this unit. You're done." The words struck harder than gunfire, not because she feared losing the mission, but because some part of her, buried deep, had hoped she might finally belong. She nodded once, slow, controlled. Then she turned away before he could see the flicker of hurt she wouldn't let slip. The base swallowed her, corridors dim, walls humming with the echo of distant generators. Men passed her, some nodding faintly, most pretending not to see her. She walked with the same pace she always had, steady, deliberate, but inside her chest ached. Her quarters were small, sterile, barely more than a bunk and a metal locker. She set the rifle case down gently, her hands lingering on the latches as though afraid to let go. Then she sat on the edge of the bunk, elbows on her knees, head bowed. The silence pressed in, and in that silence the memories came. Her brother's face, the day he left, the day he didn't return, the hollow seat at the table, the silence her family never filled again. And then another face, a child, not the one she had saved but the one she hadn't, the one who had been caught in the blast years ago when orders had pushed too fast, when her shot had come too late. That failure had lived inside her ever since, stitched into every breath, every mission, every trigger pull. Her hands curled into fists, not from anger, from grief, from the weight of carrying both the living and the lost. A knock at the door broke the stillness. She didn't move at first, didn't answer, but the knock came again, sharp, persistent. She opened the door to find the sergeant who had doubted her from the start. His face was grim, eyes restless. For a moment he just stood there, as if unsure what he wanted to say. Then he muttered, "That kid would be dead if it weren't for you." Her chest tightened. She didn't reply. He shifted awkwardly, scratching at his jaw. "Doesn't matter what the commander says. Some of us saw it, we know." And just like that, he was gone. She closed the door, leaning her forehead against the cool metal for a moment. His words lingered, quiet but steady. They didn't erase the commander's fury. They didn't erase the mission's failure. But they reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. Not everyone saw her as invisible. She returned to the bunk, sat down, and let herself breathe. The ache in her chest didn't vanish, but it eased, just enough. Because the mission wasn't over. She knew it in her bones. The cartel leader was still out there, still breathing, still haunting the world. And if command wouldn't let her take the shot, she would find another way. The rifle case waited beside her, silent, patient, ready. She reached for it, running her hand along its edge, and whispered into the empty room, not a promise, not a plan, just a truth she couldn't deny. "This isn't finished." The words hung in the air, quiet, certain. And in that moment she wasn't broken, she wasn't ignored, she wasn't done. She was waiting. And waiting was its own kind of power. Night on the base was never truly dark. Floodlights carved hard lines across the dirt, shadows clung to fences, generators hummed like a restless conscience. She sat at the edge of her bunk, boots laced, rifle case open. She wasn't supposed to be awake. She wasn't supposed to be here at all. The commander had made it clear. She was finished. Removed from the operation, stripped of authority, left to fade back into silence. But silence wasn't surrender. Not to her. She traced the stock of her rifle with steady fingers, feeling the grooves she had memorized long ago. It was more than steel. It was history, discipline, memory, a voice that spoke when she couldn't. And tonight she needed it more than ever. The intel reports she wasn't supposed to see still lingered in her mind. The convoy's escape route. The villages whispered about in intercepted radio chatter. The safe houses marked but not yet raided. She had pieced it together in silence, connecting dots no one else bothered to. And she knew where he would be. Her breath came steady as she closed the case, the sound of the latches clicking like the ticking of a clock. Not reckless, not rage, just inevitability. The hallway outside was empty, boots echoing softly against concrete. She moved like she always did, unseen, unheard, as though the air itself bent to let her pass. At the motor pool she found what she needed, a vehicle fueled, ready, forgotten. She slid behind the wheel, fingers gripping leather, heart heavy but calm. This wasn't rebellion. This wasn't insubordination. This was duty, not to orders, not to the commander, to something older, deeper. Justice. The engine growled to life, low and steady, blending into the hum of the night. No one stopped her. No one even noticed. And soon the base lights faded in the rearview mirror, swallowed by desert darkness. The road stretched endless ahead, dust trailing behind like a phantom. Her headlights cut thin lines across the emptiness, but her mind saw further, saw the map she had memorized, saw the path he would take, saw the face she couldn't forget. Her brother. His laughter, his absence, the hollow ache of a seat forever empty. She gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched. She wasn't chasing revenge. Not anymore. Revenge burned too fast, too bright. This was something else. This was balance, a weight that had to be settled or it would crush her forever. Hours passed. The desert bled into mountains, the road narrowing, winding. She slowed, headlights dimmed, vehicle hidden beneath the cloak of night. She parked beneath the shadow of a ridge, killed the engine, and listened. Silence, then faint, distant engines. She climbed, rifle case strapped across her back, boots gripping stone, breath steady against the climb. The night air was cold, sharp, carrying the scent of dust and smoke. She welcomed it. It cleared her, centered her. At the top she lay prone, setting the rifle with reverence. The scope opened the world below, a cluster of trucks, armed men moving like restless shadows, a house lit faintly from within. And there the silhouette she had memorized. Broad shoulders, scarred face, arrogance etched into the way he moved. The cartel leader. Her breath caught, then steadied. 3,000 meters once more, the impossible distance. But now it didn't feel impossible. It felt inevitable. She pressed her cheek to the stock, eye to the glass, hand steady. The world narrowed. But then movement. The child. Her stomach turned to stone. The same child. The same bright dress on the woman at their side. Brought here, dragged here, caught in the orbit of violence again. Her chest constricted. Fate had a cruel way of testing resolve. The radio at her side hissed. She froze. Slowly she lifted it. Static crackled, then a voice, not the commander's, the sergeant's. "You're out there, aren't you?" She didn't answer. "You think I do know? I saw the motor pool. I know where you're headed. Listen." His voice broke, then steadied. "You're not wrong, but if you do this, you're alone." Silence stretched. She placed the radio down, not switching it off, but not speaking. Her focus returned to the scope. The leader laughed at something unseen, a gesture sharp, cruel. His men hovered, rifles heavy, eyes scanning the night. Her finger found the trigger. But inside the war raged. One shot could end it, end him, end the years of blood and fear. But one wrong breath, one wrong gust of wind, and the child could pay the price. Again, innocence was tethered to violence. Again, the choice was hers. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting memory surge. Her brother's laugh. The sound of children playing before war took it away. The face of the child she had failed long ago. And then the child she had saved, alive, running, safe. Her eyes opened, steady, certain. The crosshairs slid, not to the man's head, not to his chest, but lower. To his weapon. To the edge of the table he leaned on. To the places where warning could be given before judgment fell. She exhaled, gentle, quiet, the trigger squeezed. The shot cracked, tearing through night. The leader's glass shattered beside him, spraying shards across his face. He flinched, staggered, guards swarming instantly, shouting, searching the dark. He was alive, for now. Her breath steadied, her heart quiet. She didn't need to kill him tonight, not yet. Because tonight wasn't the end. Tonight was the message. He was not untouchable. The radio hissed again. The sergeant's voice, low, urgent. "You still with me? What did you do?" She didn't answer. She packed the rifle with the same calm reverence as always, movements deliberate, unhurried, even as shouts below grew louder. When the last latch clicked, she stood, the weight of the rifle across her back like a shadow she had chosen to carry. And for the first time since the mission began, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Because the impossible was no longer impossible. It was only unfinished. By morning, the base knew. She could feel it the second she returned, the stares, the whispers, the silence that followed her like a shadow. Word traveled faster than bullets in places like this. They knew she had gone out alone. They knew she had fired. And though no one said it to her face, she could read it in their eyes. Some called her reckless, others called her dangerous, but a few, just a few, looked at her with something else. A question, a kind of quiet respect. The commander, though, had no respect left to give. He summoned her within the hour, the briefing room colder now than it had ever been. Maps were spread across the table again, but his focus wasn't on them. It was on her. "You think this is a game," he spat, voice sharp enough to cut the air. "You think you can freelance missions, fire at targets without authorization, and walk back in here like nothing happened?" She didn't move, didn't answer. His hand slammed the table, rattling coffee mugs and pens. "You endangered the entire operation. You endangered this unit. You endangered yourself." She finally raised her eyes, calm, steady. "And I reminded him he's not untouchable." For a moment silence hung heavy. Then his laugh bitter, hollow. "You reminded him. That's your justification, a message." Her lips pressed tight. She could have told him everything. The child, the innocence she refused to gamble, the line she would not cross again, but she didn't. He wouldn't understand, not him. Instead, she simply said, "The mission isn't finished." His face hardened. "You're finished." The words landed heavy, but she didn't flinch. She'd expected them, maybe even welcomed them, because she knew what came next wasn't going to happen within his orders, within his approval. She stood slowly, pushing the chair back with deliberate quiet, and before walking out she gave him the one truth he didn't want to hear. "I'll finish it, with or without you." The door closed behind her, cutting off his rage. Outside, the sergeant leaned against the wall, waiting. He didn't speak at first, just studied her face, searching for something. Then he said, almost reluctantly, "You shook him. That's why he's furious. Not because you disobeyed, because you proved you could do what he couldn't." She met his eyes, steady, silent. He sighed, shaking his head. "You're going after him, aren't you?" Her silence was the answer. He rubbed his jaw, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket, slipping it into her hand before walking away. "Coordinates, that's all you get. Don't ask me for more." She unfolded it slowly. A grid, a location deep in the mountains, remote, isolated, a place chosen by men who believed distance was protection. She traced the lines with her fingertip, her pulse steady. This was it, the final step. That night she prepared with the same calm she always carried. No rush, no frenzy, each bullet inspected, each latch checked, each piece of gear chosen with purpose. This wasn't vengeance. This wasn't defiance. This was clarity. When she was ready, she stood in front of the mirror bolted to the wall. The woman staring back at her was the same and yet not. Her face carried lines of fatigue, eyes hollowed by memory, but there was something else now. Resolve. A weight that no dismissal, no command could take away. She whispered just once to the reflection. "For him, for me, for every silence I carried." The road to the mountains was long, winding, merciless. She drove alone, headlights slicing through darkness, tires crunching against gravel. The world around her was empty, yet alive, coyotes calling in the distance, wind howling across stone, stars burning cold above. At dawn, she parked miles from the coordinates. The rest she would do on foot. The climb was brutal. Steep ridges, thin air, rocks cutting into her palms as she pulled herself higher. But her body moved with rhythm, trained, relentless. Pain was nothing now. Pain was background noise. Hours passed before she reached the ridge overlooking the valley. She lay flat, heart steady, eyes narrowing as she slid the rifle from its case. The scope opened the world below. There it was, the safe house, larger than the last, fortified, surrounded by guards moving in patterns she instantly memorized, trucks parked outside, men smoking, packing, restless. And then him. The cartel leader stepped out into the pale morning light, arrogance etched into every move. His guards hovered like shadows, but he didn't look afraid. He looked untouchable. Her finger brushed the trigger. She could end it now. From here, one shot, the impossible distance once more. But something held her. Not fear, not hesitation, something deeper. Because she knew this wasn't just about the shot. It was about everything leading to it. The silence, the doubt, the choice to save instead of kill, the refusal to be defined by orders or by failure. Her breath slowed. She pressed her cheek to the stock, her pulse aligned with the reticle. And just as she steadied, movement. The child again. Dragged from a truck this time, forced forward by men with rifles. Not running free, not laughing, a hostage, a message. Her chest burned. They knew. They knew she was out there. They were using innocence as bait, as leverage, as a shield. And in that moment, the mission became more than orders, more than vengeance, more than justice. It became a reckoning. Her radio hissed faintly. She hadn't realized she'd kept it on. The sergeant's voice, low, almost a whisper. "If you're there, make it count." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her finger curled tighter on the trigger. The wind shifted. The world narrowed. And she knew the next shot would decide everything. The valley held its breath. Her eye stayed pressed to the scope, the reticle steady, her heartbeat aligned with the rhythm of the earth itself. 3,000 meters. The distance everyone had called impossible. The distance that had become her burden, her test, her truth. Below, the cartel leader stood near the house, laughing, surrounded by men with rifles. And beside them, the child. Small, trembling, forced to the ground. A shield of flesh against steel. Her finger brushed the trigger, but the weight wasn't on the rifle. It was on her, on the choice. The same choice she had carried all along. Innocence or mission, humanity or orders. The wind shifted, cool against her cheek. She closed her eyes just for a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat she heard them all, her brother's laughter, the echo of children in a village long gone, the cries of the child she hadn't saved, the silence of the one she had. All of it blended, tangled, heavy. She opened her eyes, and the world was clear. The leader wasn't her true target. He never had been. The target was silence. The kind that allowed men like him to believe they were untouchable. The kind that made children weapons instead of lives. The kind that had tried to bury her. And silence was a target she could kill. Her breath flowed out. Long, gentle. The reticle slid not over the child, not over the leader's chest, but to the hand of the guard holding the hostage's collar. Her finger squeezed. The shot cracked like thunder across the valley. The guard dropped instantly, his grip on the child releasing in death. The boy stumbled free, collapsing to the dirt, eyes wide, frozen by fear but alive. The camp erupted. Men shouted, rifles raised, chaos tearing through order. But she was already chambering another round, breath steady, heart silent. Another guard moved, dropped. Another aimed, fell. One by one, shadows collapsed under her precision. Not random, not reckless. Each shot chosen, deliberate, cutting away the wall of violence until only one figure remained. The leader. He stumbled backward, dust rising around his boots, his arrogance cracked for the first time. He shouted orders, desperate, furious, but his men hesitated. Fear had crept into their eyes. They no longer saw her as a ghost shot. They saw her as inevitable. Her reticle found him. The impossible distance shrank into nothing. She saw every line on his face, every scar he wore like pride, every ounce of cruelty he had built his empire on. Her breath stilled. Her brother's face flashed once more, not in pain, not in death, alive, laughing, as if to remind her who she was, not what she had lost. She squeezed the trigger. The sound was almost soft this time. The leader jerked, staggered, collapsed. Dust rose around him, swallowing arrogance, swallowing cruelty, swallowing everything he had built on blood. Silence fell. Not the heavy silence of guilt, not the hollow silence of being ignored, but a silence clean, sharp, unbroken. Her hands lowered the rifle, slowly, reverently. She lay still for a moment, cheek against the stock, eyes closed, letting the silence wrap around her. Then she rose, packed the rifle piece by piece, each click of the latches like the closing of a chapter. She slung it across her back, the weight familiar but lighter now. The valley below was chaos still, but she didn't stay to watch it unfold. She didn't need to. She already knew what she had done. The climb down was slow, steady. Pain gnawed at her muscles, but it felt different now. Not punishment, not burden, just proof of what she had carried. When she reached the vehicle, she paused, leaning against the door, staring once more at the mountains behind her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just breathed. On the drive back, the radio stayed silent. No commander, no orders, no accusations, just the sound of the road and the hum of the engine, steady and certain. At the base, she didn't report to the commander. She didn't need to. He already knew. They all would. She walked past the briefing room without looking in, boots echoing through the hallways. No one stopped her. No one spoke. She reached her quarters, set the rifle case gently on the floor, and sat at the edge of her bunk. The room was quiet, small, unchanged, but she wasn't the same woman who had left it. Her hands rested on her knees. Her shoulders sagged just slightly, releasing weight she had carried for years. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel something fragile, not pride, not triumph, something simpler. Peace. She thought of the child alive, of her brother remembered, of silence broken. And she realized the truth. The mission had never been about distance. It had never been about proving them wrong. It had never been about revenge. It had been about carrying dignity through the noise, through the doubt, through the impossible. About choosing humanity when everything around her demanded otherwise. Her eyes closed. And as the base settled into night, her last thought drifted like a whisper, a truth too soft for orders, too sharp for silence. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.